Every city has a story that people refuse to talk about. Some call them urban legends, old myths created to scare children into behaving. Others simply lower their voices, glance over their shoulders, and change the subject before another word is spoken. After 12 years as an investigative journalist, I had learned one thing about stories like these. Most of them eventually fell apart under facts. There was always an explanation, a misunderstanding, a coincidence, a forgotten detail that made everything seem ordinary again. But every now and then, there was a story that refused to be explained, a case that stayed with you long after the notebook was closed, long after the cameras stopped recording, long after logic had run out of answers. 3 months ago, I received something that changed the way I looked at every unsolved mystery I had ever investigated. It arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning. No return address, no postage stamp I recognized, just a plain brown envelope sitting on my desk before I even arrived at the office. My assistant swore nobody had delivered it. Security cameras showed nothing unusual. It was simply there. Across the front, written in faded black ink, was a single sentence. Stop trying to close the 1958 case. My heart skipped for a moment. I had never investigated any case from 1958. In fact, I couldn't remember ever mentioning that year in any article I'd written. Curious, I opened the envelope. Inside was a single black and white photograph. It showed a little girl, maybe 8 years old, standing in front of an old wooden house. She wore a simple white dress and clutched a worn teddy bear tightly against her chest. At first glance, it looked completely ordinary, but there was something about her expression that made me pause. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't crying either. She was staring directly into the camera with a look no child should ever have, as if she already knew something terrible was about to happen. I turned the photograph over. Someone had written one word with an old pencil. Find. That was it. No name, no explanation, just one command. I laughed to myself, convinced someone was trying to play an elaborate prank. My articles had made a few enemies over the years. Hoaxes weren't exactly new to me. Still, something about the photograph bothered me. That night, instead of throwing it away, I scanned it into my computer. Modern software could reveal details invisible to the naked eye. I adjusted the brightness, increased the contrast, removed decades of fading. Then I noticed something hiding in the background. Behind the girl stood the front door of the house. Attached beside it was an old metal address plate, nearly impossible to see in the original image. I zoomed in again. My pulse slowed. Number 17. The digits were scratched and weathered, but unmistakable. Suddenly, this didn't feel like a joke anymore. The next morning, I visited the city archives. Old newspaper records had recently been digitized, making searches much easier than they used to be. I entered 3 numbers into the database. 1958, House 17, missing child. Thousands of results appeared before narrowing to one tiny article buried near the bottom of an old local newspaper. The headline was barely larger than the surrounding text. 8-year-old Elif Korkmaz disappears without a trace. I opened the article. It contained only 3 short paragraphs. According to the report, Elif had vanished sometime during the evening of October 14, 1958. Neighbors claimed they heard nothing unusual. Police found no signs of forced entry. Search teams combed nearby forests for weeks without finding a single clue. Then the investigation simply stopped. No suspects, no evidence, no explanation. Case closed. That alone was strange enough. But when I searched for follow-up articles, there were none. No interviews with the family, no memorial services, no anniversary stories, nothing. It was as if the girl had disappeared from history twice. First from her home, then from everyone's memory. I requested the original police records. The archivist disappeared into a back room for nearly 20 minutes before returning with an uncomfortable expression. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Those files no longer exist." I asked what he meant. Records didn't simply vanish, especially not police investigations involving missing children. He hesitated before answering. Officially, they were destroyed during a flood in the early 70s. Officially, it was the way he emphasized that word that caught my attention. Unofficially, I asked. The man looked toward the security cameras mounted in the ceiling before leaning closer. Some files weren't destroyed by water. He swallowed hard. Some files were removed. By who? He slowly shook his head. Nobody ever told us. Before I could ask another question, he stood up and politely ended the conversation. As I walked back toward my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had just warned me without actually saying the words. That evening, I searched property records connected to house number 17. The address still existed, barely. Located on the far edge of the city, in a neighborhood scheduled for demolition decades ago, but somehow forgotten. Satellite images showed only abandoned streets, swallowed by overgrown trees. No recent photographs, no listed owner. According to municipal records, the property had remained vacant for 43 years. 43 years. I stared at that number for several minutes. Then I looked back at the photograph of the little girl. Something didn't add up. The house in the picture looked lived in. Fresh paint, clean windows, flower boxes beneath the porch. Yet every official document claimed nobody had entered the property for decades. Either the records were wrong, or the photograph wasn't taken when people believed it was. By sunrise the next morning, curiosity had become something stronger. I packed my camera equipment, voice recorder, flashlight, extra batteries, and notebook into the trunk of my car. I told no one where I was going. Experience had taught me that people become strangely protective whenever an old mystery begins waking up again. The drive lasted almost 2 hours. The farther I traveled, the quieter the roads became. Gas stations disappeared. Cell service faded until my phone displayed no signal across the screen. Eventually, even the GPS began recalculating before freezing entirely. The road narrowed into cracked pavement surrounded by dense woods. The trees seemed unusually tall, their branches bending together above the road until daylight struggled to reach the ground. The temperature dropped noticeably, even though it was still early autumn. Then I saw the first abandoned house.